Great to see you folks. Bobby Broyles along with Rob Washburn here for this weekend CA football presented by Geico. Let's get right to the headlines as we recap week 3, Rob, as the league had another great week against non-conference FCS competition. But the highlight of Saturday has to be Towson going into Villanova, knocking off the Wildcats.
Yeah, Towson coach Rob Ambrose and his players have been saying since the summer that the Tigers were being overlooked and this year would be different.
Yep.
Going in on the road against an unbeaten and 10th-ranked Villanova team and putting 45 points on the board against one of the top defenses in FCS sends a pretty clear statement that this Towson team could be one to be reckoned with as the year goes along. Quarterback Tom Flacco was tremendous, throwing for 320 yards and 3 touchdowns, and the Tigers came up with some big plays on defense and special teams to head into their bye week with a 2-1 mark. Also heading into a bye week in 2-1 is Rhode Island, which gave FBS foe UConn all it could handle before coming up on the short end of a 56-49 shootout. Rams quarterback Jawan Lawson was virtually unstoppable with 436 yards of total offense and 6 touchdowns. It was a difficult loss for Rhodey in a game that they thought they could win, but the Rams have shown they are for real in 2018. JMU and Richmond moved up their games to Thursday in advance of Hurricane Florence, and both picked up victories as the Dukes cruised past Robert Morris 73-7, and the Spiders drove 65 yards in the final minute and got a game-winning 6-yard TD pass from Kevin Johnson to Tyler Wilkins with 1.7 seconds left to Ed St. Francis. On Saturday, Delaware and Stony Brook turned in dominant defensive performances and earned their second straight wins, while UAlbany picked up its first victory of the year as freshman Dev Holmes capped a 238-yard receiving night with a game-winning 88-yard TD reception as the Great Danes topped Morgan State. CA football is now 13-1 against non-conference FCS competition, and 10 of the league's 12 teams were either ranked or receiving votes in this week's top 25 polls. Pretty impressive start to the year.
Yes, indeed. This Saturday begins with a huge non-conference matchup for the CAA as Delaware heads into the Fargo Dome to take on the #1 team and reigning national champions North Dakota State at 2 o'clock on ESPN+.
Yeah, what a great opportunity for the Blue Hens to meet the #1 team in the nation in one of the best environments for college football at the FCS level. Delaware has shown steady improvement since its season-opening loss to Rhode Island, but will be going on the road for the first time this year. Quarterback Pat Kehoe is the first Blue Hens quarterback to pass for over 200 yards in his first 3 games of his career, and perhaps more impressively, has thrown for 6 touchdowns with no interceptions. Wide receiver Joe Walker is coming off a career-best performance versus Cornell with 6 catches for 154 yards and a TD, and it's going to be important for him to make some big plays against a tough Bison defense that has given up only 208 yards and 5 points per game. Delaware is ranked in the top 15 in FCS in every major defensive category, but the Blue Hens will face their toughest test of the year against veteran quarterback Easton Stick and NDSU's powerful rushing game that is averaging 325 yards per contest. It should be a fun atmosphere in the Fargo Dome.
At 3 o'clock, Maine comes off a bye after knocking off FBS foe Western Kentucky. They take on another FBS opponent this weekend as they travel to Central Michigan on ESPN+.
Yeah, after starting the season with big wins over New Hampshire and Western Kentucky, Maine probably would have liked to keep playing last week, but having the bye allowed several guys to heal up, which should help against a second straight FBS opponent. The Black Bears have been very balanced offensively through the first 2 weeks, with quarterback Chris Ferguson throwing for 384 yards and 5 touchdowns, and the running back tandem of Joe Fitzpatrick and Ramon Jefferson combined for 300 yards on the ground. Maine's black hole defense has been outstanding. They're giving up just 13 yards per game on the ground, which has allowed them to attack the pass, and that's resulted in 12 sacks over the first 2 contests. Deshaun Stevens and Sterling Sheffield have combined for 33 tackles and 8 tackles for loss to lead that unit. Now, Central Michigan is off to an 0-3 start, but this is a program that was 8-5 and went to a bowl game a year ago, so you know they're motivated to get into the win column. The Chippewas got a spark last week from backup quarterback Tommy Lazzaro, and CMU could give him his first start on Saturday.
At 3:30 on NBC Sports Washington Plus and CA.TV, the first conference matchup for both these teams as JMU hosts William & Mary.
Yeah, these 2 longtime in-state rivals should come into the game fresh and ready to go. William & Mary was off last Saturday after its game with Elon was washed out by Hurricane Florence, while JMU will have had a 9-day break after rolling over Robert Morris last Thursday in a game in which most of their starters only played a half. JMU's offense hasn't skipped a beat under the leadership of quarterback Ben DiNucci, who accounted for 223 yards of offense and 5 touchdowns in the first half last week. Marcus Marshall and Carden Johnson lead an incredibly deep and talented backfield, and wide receiver Riley Stapleton is off to an excellent start with 17 catches. Now they're going to face an experienced William & Mary defense that has all-conference performers at each level with defensive tackle Bill Murray, linebacker Nate Atkins, and safety Corey Parker. The Tribe held Bucknell to only 257 yards in a Week 1 win, so they've shown what they can do. William & Mary's offense has improved through the air this season as quarterback Sean Mitchell has thrown for over 200 yards in each of the first 2 games. Much of that success can be attributed to big play threat Devontae Dedmon, who has TD catches of 75 and 59 yards over the first 2 weeks. They will attempt to move the ball on a stout Duke's defense that's giving up just 215 yards and 10 points per game. Defensive end John Daka recorded 6 tackles and 2 tackles for loss in the win over Robert Morris, while All-American cornerback Jimmy Moreland has picked up a pass in each of the last 2 weeks to become the school's career interception leader. Now, turnovers played a huge role in last year's game as JMU turned 6 of them into 33 points in a 46-14 triumph. William & Mary will need to take care of the ball to have a chance to win at Bridgeport Stadium.
3 games kicking off at 6 o'clock. We start with our CA football game of the week on Sports Live as Richmond travels to Stony Brook.
Yeah, this is the conference opener for both of these 2 teams who are off to similar starts. Richmond and Stony Brook suffered road losses to FBS opponents in Week 1, but they both rebounded with back-to-back victories and both have a convincing victory over Fordham. However, that's where the similarities end. Richmond features one of the CA's top passing attacks with quarterback Kevin Johnson, averaging 242 yards through the air while hooking up with a deep and experienced group of receivers led by big play threats to Jean Brissett and Cortrell Simpson. Stony Brook relies on one of the top rushing offenses in the CAA as Jordan Gallons and Donald Leontine have combined for over 550 yards on the ground, and both have gone over the 100-yard mark in back-to-back games. The 2 defenses have put up similar numbers over the first 3 weeks, although their styles differ quite a bit. The Spiders' Maurice Jackson is leading the CAA with 4 sacks, while Stony Brook linebacker Shane Lawless is 3rd in the league with 29 tackles. Now, Stony Brook and Richmond rank 1st and 2nd in the CAA in turnover margin, and taking care of the ball could be a big factor in a matchup of 2 teams that appear to be pretty equal.
Also at 6, Villanova will look to bounce back at home as they take on Bucknell out of the Patriot League.
Yeah, after starting the year with 2 impressive performances and road wins at Temple and Lehigh, Villanova will try to rebound from a 45-35 loss to Towson in their CAA opener last Saturday. The Wildcats didn't have any issues offensively as they piled up nearly 500 yards against the Tigers. Quarterback Zach Bednarczyk threw for a career-high 389 yards and 4 TDs last week and has at least 3 TD passes in every game this season. Wide receiver Jarrett McClendon and tight end Ryan Bell have combined for 39 catches, over 500 yards, and 8 scores thus far, and Villanova has also moved the ball on the ground behind Aaron Forbes. Now, the Wildcats' defense was ranked among the top 10 in FCS before uncharacteristically giving up 528 yards a week ago. Big plays and some missed tackles led to those numbers, but it's not something I would expect to continue this week with veteran leaders like Jeff Steve and Rob Roll on that side of the ball. Bucknell has an 0-3 record, including a 14-7 setback to William & Mary in their season opener. The Bison are giving up just 340 yards per game on defense, but have struggled offensively. I would expect to see Villanova return to its previous form and get back on the winning track.
On ESPN Plus at 6 o'clock, Elon returns to action this Saturday with a trip to Charleston Southern out of the Big South.
Yeah, both of these teams were unable to play last week because of Hurricane Florence, so they should be excited to get back on the field. Elon's coming off an impressive 45-7 victory over Furman 2 weeks ago. Now, the Phoenix are the top rushing team in the CAA at over 233 yards per game, using a deep stable of backs led by senior Malcolm Summers and freshman Jalen Thomas. Summers ran for 178 yards last year when the Phoenix edged Charleston Southern 19-17, and he'd like to repeat that performance on Saturday. Quarterback Davis Cheek was solid in the Furman win, going 12 of 15 through the air, with most of those completion going to sophomore Cortez Weeks. Now, Elon's defense was also impressive against Furman, holding the Paladins to 266 yards and coming up with a huge turnover for a TD on the opening drive of the game. All-America linebacker Warren Messer and McAllister Ingram had 11 tackles apiece in that victory. Charleston Southern has only played 1 game this season, and that was a 53-6 loss to Florida on September 1st, so it's real hard to get much of a read on the Buccaneers. They're a team that relies heavily on the run offensively, and they were able to pile up 222 yards on the ground against the Gators. As I mentioned earlier, the game was decided by just a field goal a year ago, and it should be a pretty competitive one once again.
We wrap up Week 4 with Albany staying at home for a 7 o'clock matchup versus St. Francis.
Yeah, UAlbany showed a lot of fight last Saturday, overcoming 5 turnovers to pick up their first win of the season, 30-27 over Morgan State. Vince Testaverde had a tough night with 4 interceptions, but he came out big in the clutch with an 88-yard strike to Dev Holmes in the fourth quarter and finished the game with a career-best 310 yards through the air. Holmes has been simply incredible through 3 weeks, catching 21 passes for 459 yards. He's a threat to score whenever he touches the ball, and the Great Danes would love to get star running back Elijah Ibitoke and Hanks rolling to provide a big play potential on the ground as well. Now, UAlbany's been battling injuries defensively, and they haven't performed up to past standards, but they did seal last week's win as Dean Grogg forced a fumble that Eli Mensa recovered in the final 2 minutes. St. Francis gave Richmond all it could handle last week before losing 35-27 in the final seconds. Quarterback Bear Fenimore threw for 208 yards and 3 TDs against the Spiders, and Cam Lewis is a big-time receiver on the outside.
CASports.com/live scores is your source for live scoring and in-game live stats throughout this Saturday. Also, remember to check in with us later that night with a complete wrap-up with our CA Football Rewind on CAFootball.com.
Yeah, of course, you can continue to follow the league on our many social media platforms, such as Facebook.com/CA Football and Twitter @CA Football using the hashtag CAFB.
The CA Football on-campus crew is back at it this weekend with a road trip to Harrisonburg to CJMU. Make sure to follow all of our social media platforms for behind-the-scenes coverage from this weekend, and come back to CAFootball.com next Thursday for a Going Deep feature on the Dukes. That is it from us today. Enjoy the games, everyone.